right, welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay in getting started. We are all here and we just wanted to give you some extra time, to grab that tea, that drink, and get extra cozy for what is going to be a really special evening. I see participants are still coming in. As you're coming in, we'll be using the chat feature to go back and forth and talk with each other. Feel free to introduce yourselves, give us your name, where you're joining from, and if you're feeling really generous, I don't know, a recent book that you've loved that you want to tell us about. My name is David, and I'm the literacy educator at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Welcome everyone to our We Dream a World panel discussion. We have three very amazing guests with us tonight: Denene Millner, Charly Palmer, and Cozbi A. Cabrera. Big hitters. The big hitters are here. Before I introduce them, I just want to give a big thanks to our members and our donors, because your contributions really help to make our work possible. Thank you. The Patricia Morrison McDonald Endowment Fund for supporting the Carle's education programming, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council for their operational support. I'd also like to thank our co-hosts for tonight, Simon & Schuster Books. Thank you all for being here and making us a part of your evening to share our love of books and art with you tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce first. Denene Millner is an award-winning journalist, the founder of the Black parenting website, My Brown Baby, and the editorial director of Denene Millner Books, whose mission is to publish beautiful, beautiful books that highlight the everyday lives of Black children and families. And her work is done, as she has written, with open arms, a lot of love, and the deep belief that though we may come from separate places and have different backgrounds, we're all people who want the same things for our families and especially our children. Thank you, Denene, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We also have with us Cozbi A. Cabrera, who does just about everything. She's a creator of so many things. She's a graphic designer, a maker of beautiful handcrafted dolls. She's a clothing designer, and an artist. She's the author and illustrator of several beautiful books, including the 2021 Caldecott and Coretta Scott King honor book, Me and, published by Denene Millner Books. And her illustrations for Exquisite, The Poetry and Life of Gwendolyn Brooks from Abram Books, also received a 2021 Coretta Scott King honor and Robert Seibert Informational Book honor. That's a mouthful, but whew, I got through it. Cozbi, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Good to see everyone. I'm looking forward to our time together tonight.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have with us Charly. Charly made it. We had some trouble getting him on, but he's with us. Thank you. Live from Atlanta, Georgia. Again, Charly does so much. She's a fine artist, a graphic designer, an arts instructor. Received the 2018 Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Award for his book Mama Africa. He's the illustrator of My Rainy Day Rocketship, which is another one of my favorites from 2019, also published by Denene, and recently featured. That book was also recently featured in the Carle's Library exhibition, Black Voices, Picture Books as Anti-Racist Resources. And the latest book, as far as I know, which I absolutely love too, is The Teacher's March, How Selma's Teachers Changed History, out just 2020 from Calkins Creek. So welcome, and thank you for joining us, Charly.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be among these pretty amazing people. So thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no, We're honored to have you with us. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Denene, who's really going to be moderating tonight's conversation. But before I do that, I just want to again invite everyone who's already chatting, keep up the conversation in the chat feature. If you have questions specifically for our panelists, feel free to type those into the Q&A feature, and we'll pass it along. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Denene.
Thank you, David. I have to say hello to my daughter, Mari. I see that she logged in. I'm super excited that she's here to watch this. She's a huge fan of Mr. Palmer and Miss Cabrera. And so she's taking time out of her study schedule. I hope you studying, little girl, for the MCATs. But here she is hanging out with us tonight. And I'm so happy that you all are hanging out with us tonight. I am so pleased and honored to be here with Charly Palmer, with Cozbi A. Cabrera, to talk about something that the three of us absolutely adore, and that's children's picture books, and particularly creating worlds that help children who look like us see themselves on the page. So I'm gonna pose this question to both of you, and you guys can answer at whichever person wants to go first. But when you dream a world on a page, what is it that you see when you're thinking about a children's book, like your perfect children's book? What would that, when you dream that world, what does it look like?
Ladies first, please.
You know, it's really funny. I think that there are certain projects that I'm drawn to. Like I am drawn to a manuscript that has a little brown girl. You know, it just reminds me of who I was in the world as a little brown girl, and oftentimes not well received because I was brown, you know, until something else showed up, you know, and people realized that I had certain gifts or whatever have you. And so I'm sort of speaking to that girl because I know that there are girls out there, much so like myself, who need to find themselves and center themselves, to locate themselves and know that they are just amazing and beautiful and exquisite. And so that's my message to them as I'm sort of working around the page. And then just the idea of story, you know, for me, story and translating things visually means trying to locate the heart, to find the heart of the story. And sometimes that's a process, you know, as you're working through a book, you know, from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And Charly.
You know what, I think similar. One of the things I was going to say is that it's always the manuscript that dictates whether or not I can connect with it. I need to like read it first to kind of feel, do I see this character or can I imagine them? And I think it's very important that I like, and I think we've kind of had, Denene and I had this conversation before. It's not about, the story isn't about race, it's about everyday kids. And I love to see images of me. And so the example that I think I may have used in the conversation today is a snowy day. And the idea that it was not about a little black kid, but the black kid, it had a black child. And it's till this day, one of the greatest books ever made. And it inspired me as a visual artist because of the color, the textures and the patterns and everything like that. So I think that it's easy once I read a manuscript to imagine it. And then like once I do a very rough sketch and I start looking for models, sometimes I will grab someone off the street because as I'm reading it and I'm trying to imagine what the character looks like, I'll see someone and say, that's her or that's him.
Mm-hmm. Charly, your process is to actually go out and find models, just like you just said. And then I've been with you where you've kind of posed children up into the ways that they would appear on the page that you've envisioned in your mind, and then take pictures of them in order to sort of create this world for the picture books. Explain that process.
I'm coming from an illustration background, and what was so crucial, I've been doing that for 35, 40, maybe 50 years now. I lose count. But we've always had major file cabinets of images of everything from fruit to vegetables to buildings to horses and whatever. And so I've always kind of, thank goodness for Google, now we just Google a lot of the reference material, but I've always been taught, and I always tell artists, learn the form, but always find photographs or shoot photographs, and you can use those photographs as a reference point. So you're not tied to that photograph, but it helps you to kind of understand how something bends and folds and how to force perspectives and things like that. And so I've always come from the place of using reference or photography and then skewing it and distorting it in ways to manipulate it for what I'm trying to accomplish.
What about you, Cozbi? How does it work for you?
Yeah, so I think young artists or emerging artists, they need to, this is my prescription, is to never tire of life study. And that is, going and seeing the body, through gestural movement and draw and examine the anatomy, because there are times when you may not find, as Charly is implying in terms of the reference file, you may not find that right angle or that perspective. And so you've got to be able to understand, like, well, how does the hand bend and fold? And, it's like, what can it do? And so I say never tire of life study for training, just keep that sketchbook, keep observing, keep making mental notes, for example, a lot of fashion illustration shows the human body like 9 heads tall, but the real human body, the average human body is not 9 heads tall. It's like we're maybe about 7.5 if we can,
Right.
Yeah, so just keep observing in nature and in life.
You both are fine artists, and I am such a huge fan of beautiful art, fine art. What's the difference, or is there a difference between what you do for your everyday job versus what you do on a page for a children's book?
Charly, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. You know what? The only difference is I'm creating for an audience. When I'm creating fine art, it is kind of coming from a spiritual standpoint, and it changes. Like I'm working on a body of work right now for an opening next week, and every day I come in here, certain things shift. What I typically do when I'm working on my work is I'll take pictures at the end of the day, every day, and I'll go home and I'll look at those pieces for a little bit, and by the next day, it shifts. And so, and I think that when you're doing a children's book and you have a layout, you have to kind of stay true to what you initially submit. And so there's sometimes a little less spontaneity. And what I'm doing, there's a lot of spontaneity. There's a lot of, some days I might want to just splash paint or use some spray cans or incorporate some papers. And I pull back a little bit on that. And I'm also having to very much consider my audience. And so where I might go when I'm creating work, fine art, I have to kind of consider who I'm creating for. Although, again, Denene, we've talked about that. I'm not for trying to dumb it down and make it simple. I do want, I think the kids that look at this work, they're very intelligent. And so take it as far as you want to and understand that they're going to get it.
Right, that's right. What about you, Cozbi?
Yeah, I think, like Charly, there are definitely points of confluence. I think that any work that even an illustrator does is you're doing it from a specific point of view. Otherwise, anybody else could do it. There's a certain kind of point of view that you have. Like, for example, there's an illustration of Gwendolyn Brooks, and I'm trying to show, there was one year in her life that she was moving from like an all-Black school to an all-white school to a mixed school and did not fit in anywhere. And so I thought, well, how could I show that? And so I drew from and inferred from my own personal experience. And I thought, what better way to show that is a game of double dutch, because I was always told that I was double-handed. No matter how well I was turning, they would like point to me, where I was standing, say, you're double-handed, out I went, And so I was just thinking about this whole notion of not fitting in. And so I showed her passing through, clutching her books, passing through that double Dutch line, just like not fitting in there.
Right.
So I think that there's some personal things that we bring to commercial work for sure, and a point of view. But then when it comes to personal work, the sky's the limit. You know, you just are coming from a very private and even nourishing place.
Right. I have to say, as an editor who's charged with not only paying attention to the words, but having to have some kind of working knowledge of the storytelling from an illustrative point of view, that is the most challenging part for me, because I of course respect authors' words because I am an author, and so I tend to be hands off when it comes to that, but I'm even more so when it comes to the illustrations, because I'm just like, I don't know how to paint. I don't want to mess with that. So it's hard for me to even, like, talk to the two of you about, like, well, can you just change that, just this, I'm constantly like, I don't want to ask you to do it.
Can I give you an example? Okay.
Sure.
So initially for this peekaboo scene, I had the mom holding her, she wasn't peeking, so nothing was showing. There was no air in there. And you came to me and you said, Cozbi, it'd be nice if we had an indication of a smile or something, so that the mother feels as joyful as her daughter. And I kind of like was digging in a little, because, it's like I felt that I had portrayed her in the true way, because grown-ups don't peek, and so nothing's showing. Right. But I did entertain you, and because there's no harm in trying it another way. And it wasn't until I was done trying it another way that I said, you know what, I felt really strongly about, keeping it the way I had it, but this is in fact better.
And it was not easy for me to ask.
To have that outside eye in,
right.
To make something better, and to be willing to, to try it. You can always go back to what's original, that's not disturbed, but try something else.
Let me tell you, if you would have pushed one more time, I'd have been like, okay, all right. Tell me about the process of storytelling. Like, once you read the words, how do you go about envisioning what that story is going to look like from your point of view? And is it difficult to honor the words? Do you see a different story from what, the words say? And Cozbi, I know that you wrote for Me and Mama, you wrote and illustrated. And so clearly there's a difference between that and telling the story of someone else who actually wrote the story. But what's that like, to see someone's words? And, for those who aren't familiar with the way that the process works, I find it weird, but, I'm told that it's this way for a reason. The author never engages with the artist, ever. I've gone for almost a decade without, like, an artist who illustrated a book that I wrote, knowing that I wrote the book. Well, I was a ghostwriter, but he didn't know that I wrote the book, because there is never, it's a separation of church and state. Yeah. And so what's it like to not have access to the person who conceived this story in his or her mind, and then make your own story and then see it on the page?
Can I jump in, or?
Yeah, please. I'll do next.
Yeah. Okay. So the thinking is to keep visual artist and author separate, because the author, whose precious darling and baby this is, could start to imply that this would be a good approach. And then when you start getting those kinds of suggestions, things get a little tainted. And so because you're not really getting the benefit of the full visual artist imagination, without any of this sort of, whispering in the ear business, that can sort of like move things in directions. And then you wind up not getting the best of it,
Mm-hmm.
Can I show some of my screen, or?
Yes, yeah.
All right, let me see if I can do this easily. If I can't, then I'll abandon it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So it's about making some decisions. And I think this is where a lot of young illustrators get stuck because they can't decide what to do. So try it a few different ways. And it's okay, you can change your mind. It's not the end of the world, but don't just stay in a stuck place is what I say. You know, and we start with sketches and, you know, as we're sketching, we make certain decisions. You know, like when I first started, I didn't even know what age a protagonist was going to be. And then I decided. And then I think it's really important to just try it several different ways, to just remain in flow, you know, and just keep trying different things until you come to some conclusions, you know. And there are times when maybe you're trying like several different ideas as opposed to an iteration of one idea. And you come to a place in that exploration where you feel you've captured something, you know, be it a turn of the expression or something that just hit that sweet spot for you. And then you go to paint it and it may not necessarily translate well. So like, for example, this, I thought I was done because I handed this in a year ahead. And then like about 10 months later, Alice Faye came out with this beautiful Gwendolyn Brooks book.
That's right.
Like, oh, we can't have two pink books. I'm like, but mine was pink first. But it doesn't matter. You know? And of course, you know, her book was pink without her knowledge that I had submitted something pink. And so you go in there and you do what you have to do, you know. Sometimes you, as you're sketching, you're like, for example, this, I had her, you know, holding some papers and blowing them out because she was sending her words out into the world at 11 years old. And then I had another sketch of her, you know, blowing out her candles. And sometimes you're combining different ideas, you know.
Right. Right.
And then this idea about workspace, it doesn't have to be a perfect workspace, your ideal workspace, you know. And then sometimes you just sort of have a place where you're starting, you know, and you just, again, try it a few different ways and, you know, so you wind up somewhere, you know, so here's a sketch and then it's final. And then I'm going to stop my share.
I just tell you, Charlie knows before COVID, I would find reasons to be in his studio just so I could be around the art and watch him create. And occasionally he would make me create some stuff and I'd be like, but I'm not an artist, stop. But it's very, very cool to see just sort of this process and just how things grow on the page and in your mind and how it translates and what ultimately ends up in the book. Charlie, what, you know, what's your process of storytelling? Like, how do you engage the words and then turn it into your own?
I think that, like, first of all, thank you for sharing. It was great to see how another artist does it. We all kind of approach it slightly different, and I'm just fascinated by how other artists do it. I think to think about trying to work with the writer, the author, would be an amazing headache. Not in a way that I'm saying they're meaning to be difficult, but they clearly have a vision. You know, like I thought it was really odd. In fact, there have been several books where I literally, after a book has been published, it's been out there for years, I never met the author of it. And it's kind of odd, but at the same time, like it makes sense because I know that we have a vision, and a writer has a vision, and to kind of meet their expectations is at times almost impossible. And I say that to say, I just recently had a project. I'm sorry, I blanked out. Can you see me? Okay, I'm sorry, yeah. I blinked out for a minute. Well, I had a project where I was doing a movie poster. And I had to come back to the creative people and say, unless you let me art direct this, I can't do it. Because what I understood is what they wanted in that one image is to tell the whole story of the movie. And I pulled all kinds of examples of that's not done. It's not possible to be done. And like I know, and it was the writer director who came to me to create it. And I'm explaining to him, it's like, it's very difficult to tell the whole story in one shot. And so I think it needs to be simplified. And I think in simplifying it, it also arouses enough curiosity for people to want to engage and actually see the movie. And so it's that kind of thing. It's like to try to meet someone else's vision becomes a huge and difficult thing to do.
Right. You both do something that if I could have my way, I would just do it this way, but it seems like illustrators are moving toward way more computer art
Mm-hmm.
than they are
Right.
reflective. And I'm a huge fan of reflective art. I just feel like I want to see the strokes in
Mm-hmm.
the picture. I want to I want to engage with the textures and the different colors and the way that they're laid out. Why have you both chose to illustrate in the way that you have? And are you at all dabbling with this sort of digital art that people are gravitating to, which did I point out that I'm not the biggest fan? Okay.
You know what? See, and we talked about that before. What I'm seeing done in Procreate and Illustrator and Photoshop and the manipulation is absolutely amazing. And so I dabbled in for a second. I mean, I actually spent some time like concentrating on learning these programs because I started to see the trend started to shift towards more digital art. But in the end, I literally like delve into it and spent hours, weeks really learning it, and then immediately dropped it and went right back to painting and haven't touched it literally now a year because I spent the whole month of February learning these techniques and everything and applying them and playing with layers and textures. And I'm like, okay, I can almost emulate exactly what I do as a painter, but there was something and is something about the experience of actually using paint that I just don't want to give up.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Charlie. You know, I think it was like maybe the late 70s, early 80s. There was this book that came out called Megatrends by John Nisbet. And one of the principles that he was espousing is that the more technologically advanced we become, the greater we start to yearn for that the homemade cookie or the hand knit sweater, because there is something that is uniquely human when there's evidence of the human hand, and that actually kind of touches us in a deep kind of place. It's like primordial, even, primal. It's it's like somehow or another, there's like a soul capture that happens with evidence of the human hand. And so I think that the more people to apply themselves to digital media, and in some of it, there is sort of a sameness, because it's like the difference between Aretha Franklin singing into a particular microphone that's like full of noise and has that analog quality, and like J-Lo. And not that I'm casting dispersion. I'm just saying it's like.
But there's a difference between Aretha and J-Lo, right?
Exactly. And so there is something really sort of like precious about the human hand that becomes almost rare because, there's a movement away from it. But I do believe that the Procreate tools are fantastic and phenomenal because I think like it's amazing for sketching and conceiving because you can size things up without having to go to the copier. You can play and rearrange things so that you don't have to be tied to what your precious little hands have done. You can come to better and quicker conclusions, by using those cut and paste tools. So I think there's a place for it, but then it's for every artist to decide, how they're going to deliver.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is digital art is cheaper to reproduce.
I guess I just, I'm a zip it because I I'm not supposed to show a bias, but I'm biased. As Black artists, was it difficult to get into the industry for either of you? How did you get into the industry, specifically painting or illustrating children's books?
Well, I'm kind of new to it. I think I've only been in the industry about 5 years, but I've always had a love for children's books. I've always collected children's books, and particularly images of Black children. And so it was for me, it was a time where I was hoping that the right project would come with a decent amount of time in a manuscript that I really was fascinated by. And once I completed that first works, I knew I wanted to do this again. And it was funny, like, because it's been 20 years of Frank Morrison, who's a personal friend, saying, Charly, you should do children's books. And I heard him, but it's like, okay, easier said than done.
Right.
But like I said, once I did the first project, I'm like, I love this. I love seeing this whole, I love also the collaboration of an author, an artist, and a designer. And I think I applaud designers so well, because there have been books that with the combination of the writing and the illustration and the designer gets a hold of it. And I'm wowed by how they combine all the work together.
Right, right. The first book that you did, you won an award straight out the gate, Mama Africa.
Right.
Right.
See, when it was like best new artist, but at the time I think I was 55 or something. But it was a nice honor, and I greatly appreciate it, and I did not expect it, and so it was an additional honor. Just the whole idea that I never expected that, so it was nice.
Yeah. How about you, Cozbi? How did you get into the industry, and do you find challenges at all being a Black artist?
Well, I guess my thrust, because I did major in communication design, and so I was about sort of the business of using design as a tool for communication, marrying words and images, and finally made my way into designing for music, which was my dream job, for Atlantic Records, and back in the day when Ahmet Ertegun was still walking the hallways. And then while I was designing for music, a friend of mine, Laura Pegram, that I'd gone to college with, she has Kweli.
That's right.
Channel. Yeah, she invited me. She was under contract, with 2 manuscripts, and she invited me to illustrate. And I'm like, oh, sure. And so I painted those in oil paint. And imagine trying to get oil paint to dry. What did it do? It wasn't happening. And so I found some like nasty little Krylon spray, the spray on top of the surface, so I could, ship and deliver. And so that was like me sort of like doing my first couple of, children's books. And then I started to make and create these handmade dolls. And I was showing the dolls at a show at the Armory when an editor walked by and said, I know this is weird, but I'd love for you to take a look at a manuscript and see if you might be interested in illustrating it. And her expectation was I was going to deliver that as textile art.
Oh,
And so
wow.
when my sketches came in, she was like really surprised,
Right.
And then I finally decided I was going to deliver it, painted. But this time I was using acrylics, which dry really quickly.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was just like me doing a book from someone who didn't realize I had done some books,
Right, already.
And then it's just a little snowball effect, And it wasn't something I was actively seeking, I was still running a shop and doing other things. And every now and then I'd get an invitation.
Right. Cozbi doing, a book that's from textile. Now my head is spinning. Let's put a pin in that one. That might be something that we might be able to, if you all haven't seen Cozbi's dolls, her muñecas is how it's pronounced. You have to go onto her website and see these gorgeous dolls. They are absolutely stunning, one-of-a-kind pieces that she hand embroiders. You pick up the dress and there's feathers and beading and their hair is, in locks and afros and texture. And the handmade clothes, just absolutely gifts from just your hands, both of you. Your hands are just gifted. And I am, again, I cannot say it enough, so deeply honored to work with the two of you. It is, my life's joy to be able to work with fine artists in this capacity. And so I thank you so much for your beautiful work. I don't want to take up all of, I know that people are in the comment section asking questions, raising their hands and asking questions. And so David, if you can hear us, if you want to allow people to ask questions, they can at this time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for, I've just kind of been losing myself in this amazing conversation and trying to keep an eye on, there are some great questions in the Q&A, which I'm sure folks are really anxious to hear your responses to. I'm going to try to group them together if I can, so that we get to hear more than just me speaking. But like one theme that I'm noticing coming up in the Q&A has to do with inspiration. You know, Charly mentioned Snowy Day as a book that has meant a lot to him. So people are wondering, first of all, everyone's saying, we love your book so much. I should have started there. And like, but one of the questions is, if Cozbi, if you have a book, I guess in the realm of children's book, that you would say has really had an impact on you. Another part of this question is, people are wondering what your inspiration for Me and Mama was, and kind of building on not only what you've done, but people are curious if there's a topic or a theme that you haven't really tackled in your work that you would like to in your work.
That's a triple decker question.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I guess, you know, there are a couple of children's books. Jerry Pinkney had done something called The Talking Eggs, which was a folk tale. And I picked it up as an adult and sort of lingered over it. I just thought that it fed something, you know, deep within me, and I loved it. And for me, that was like the power of a storybook. And then the second book that I was collecting as an adult before I had a child was Walter Dean Meyer's Brown Angels, and he had literally a collection of vintage photos of children in various you know, places all over the country. And, you know, they all had their faces scrubbed, and, you know, their Sunday clothes on, because maybe a roaming photographer was, you know, swinging by, and they were going to document their precious babies. And so it's a collection of these amazing photographs and verse. And so I read that to my daughter every night. And, you know, we both have the entire book memorized. I love the cadence. I love the rhythm of it. You know, it's just something that moves me, and hence the power of story to move, to get you to feel, to rearrange your emotional furniture, to actually have an impact, as opposed to, oh yeah, just another book, you know. And so that's, you know, anything that I touch, again, it's like, for me, every project is a journey to finding the heart of that story, because I don't want to just occupy space. You know, if I'm going to spend my time, my effort, my energy, my thought, I want it to land somewhere where someone is in fact moved and touched. And in order for someone to be moved and touched by something I do, I've got to surround myself and feed myself with the things that move and touch me, because, you know, like produces like, you know. And then Me and Mama, it was just a cup that had been broken by my 3-year-old who was trying to get me a glass of water. And I saved those broken pieces because they were even beautiful. I mean, my favorite cup was still beautiful, even though it was broken. And I thought that I was going to paint it. And so that's when I decided, you know what, let me collect these string of moments, you know, in her day, her everyday day, where her spirit and her soul is being nourished and watered and fed, you know, and that's how Me and Mama came about.
And the irony of that is that Cozbi created that book based off of this broken cup. And the thing that caught my attention when your agent brought your book to me was precisely that page. It was that page that stood out to me. The broken cup, and if you all have read the book or not, you'll see when you read Me and Mama, there's a page where the daughter is comparing her cup to her mother's cup. And she notes how they look, but also how they sound when you clink it with a spoon. And Mama says, be very careful because, you know, well, you can break it if you click on it too hard. And then the next page comes and the cup is broken. And the mother says, sometimes things break. And that to me just blew me away. I was like, I need this book. Can I please have this book? This is perfection to me. Not just because it's a mother with her daughter. I have two daughters, so it's already, gotten my heart, but because this mother is so understanding and is loving and kind to this child, and painted in a way that is different from the stereotypes that we usually see when it comes to Black mothers and their children. And so the gentleness of this mother with her child reminded me of all of the mothers that I know, reminded me of the way that I mother my own children. And it just made all the sense in the world to do. Charly, you just finished a book for Denene Millner Books that I think is also equally sensitive, but in a different way for Black boys.
Mhm.
Tell everyone about Keep Your Head Up.
Again, I think that, because I don't know if you probably did notice, when I submitted the initial pencils, I imagined the character looking one way. And I had gathered some children to do the photo shoot, and there was a kid that stood out. And I'm like, that's him.
Mhm.
And it was the brown one. It was
Right.
the
So
beautiful,
right.
chocolate brown little boy.
Absolutely.
And there was also an energy about him and everything. But I just think that, again, when I originally read that manuscript, it was one that had this profound and necessary message for young Black kids, and particularly young boys, that you're gonna have bad days and don't give up. It's gonna be better tomorrow. And I think that's message is for anybody. I mean, like children and adults. But the idea that in this case, it was a very frustrating day for him, but it's like, but that's okay and that's normal. And so I could wrap my mind around it. I could wrap certain ideas about what it would look like and what it would feel like. And I think that was like one of the things that I found as I started to develop it. I'm like, I'm connected to it. And I'm connected to everything about this kid because I felt in so many ways that this child was me.
Mhm.
And so that's why when I first read it, but as I was starting to develop it, I knew that he really is me. And I think that's very important that we can connect to it on an emotional level.
That's right. So Keep Your Head Up is a book that's written by Leah S. King. It'll be out on Denene Millner Books, Simon & Schuster in September of this year. And it's about a little boy who he wakes up just in the middle of just a crappy day. His sisters used up all his toothpaste. He woke up late. He forgot his kickball uniform, his gym uniform at school. So now he can't play kickball. He's, jacked up somebody's class project, gotten paint all over the teacher, and he has this terrible meltdown. And he ends up, like getting sent to the office, and nobody's paying him any kind of attention. And he gets to the principal's office, and Miss King, just handles him, lets him play with her records. She has a record player and records, and she lets him play with the records and sends this message that, like little Black boys are they're delicate, like we look at them in this way where they're supposed to be hard and mannish and, just, they get in trouble and they supposed to get disciplined. And she's like, no, they're like records. You handle them with care, and you put them onto the record player, and you put the needle on them gently, and you let them know that they are loved, that they make music that matters. And the entire book is just this ode to beautiful Black boys being allowed to be children, which is a message that the world needs to hear, I'm convinced. And so
Oh,
that's what
absolutely.
made me feel so strongly about publishing that book. And so I can't wait until people see it, because not only is the message amazing, but Charly just killed it. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. In every way, it's gorgeous. Okay, some more questions. Do you guys have more questions?
Well, I noticed that Courtney and myself have put in links to Keep Your Head Up. So for those who are interested in learning more, check out the chat. But it looks beautiful. And just to kind of build off that, I wanted to share this in terms of readership and young readers. Tandy June Johnson, age 5, would like Cozbi to know that the page with the boots splashing in the puddles is her favorite page.
Yeah.
Me and Mama. Um, and I think building off of thinking about audience, there's some curiosity in the comments about how the last year of it, if there's been an increase in the interest in the Black experience that you're kind of referencing right in our conversation, in addition to maybe the pandemic and what the person who wrote the question, racial reckoning, has that impacted the art that you produce as well as how you create?
I could answer that. What I find very fascinating, and it's been my experience through a lot of artists that have been out in the market for a while, and the same thing applies to a lot of galleries that have been around, is that 2020 was ironically a very stellar year for them. There was a lot of demand. If you look at everybody here who's doing a Zoom meeting, we all have artwork behind us, and everybody's doing Zoom meetings. Everybody's doing Zoom. And with those kinds of things, you have either a bareback wall, or I think a lot of people that are in their homes right now, their domiciles, they're looking around realizing they have a lot of empty spaces. And so those people, I think, started to request a lot more work. And so I had a pretty amazing year when it's come to that. But I've also, because of the pandemic and what's going on, I've had opportunities and situations literally happen because of it. I had an album cover design because the performer did not want to go into a studio. I did a Time magazine cover because of the protest after George Floyd was killed. And so it's like there are little things like that that address what I've been doing for 20 years, because my subject matter with my fine art and also what I seek when I'm doing a children's book has to do with the Black experience and living while being Black in America and the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think there was a spike of interest even. You could see it sort of buzzing along social media because there were a lot of people who may not have had the experience of racism directly, sort of denying that it is something that sort of existed, you know, that it was sort of like, oh, it's all in your, it's all in your head, you know, it's all on your neck. It's just, but it's not really the truth. And I think that this was a moment of confrontation where the entire world slowed down long enough to actually really see what was going on. And there was a tremendous sense of outrage, not just within the Black community, but just within the world, in the world, you know, that something's not right, you know, this feeling that something's not right. And then I think maybe people were questioning, well, what can we do about, you know, the fact that we might have had blinders on? And I think that some people decided that, you know what, why don't we start to introduce the literature to our earliest readers, to let them know that there is a bigger and broader world out there. You know, there was a time when we valued travel for the expansion of the mind, and you know, and the vision. You know, and then little by little, even travel changed. So you could get on a cruise ship with other people very much like you, and touch, you know, certain ports, and maybe pick up a few trinkets, and not be changed because you weren't sort of lying down on the matala beside the woman who was making the tortillas, who was trying to send her kid to school. And so like travel is the kind of thing that really changes us. And so now there's a way to travel. You could go to Cancun and stay in the resort and never interact with the people to know their mind or their thinking or the things that concern them. And so, you know, Denene and I were talking about what it means to, you know, how do you impoverish a child, no matter where that child comes from or what they look like, you impoverish them by sort of keeping sort of people that look like them away from them, so they have no understanding. You know, you impoverish a child through lack of exposure. And I think this summer was sort of that moment of realization for a lot of people that there hasn't been exposure, and that their children are very much, in fact, impoverished. And it's like nobody wants to be in that space, you know, no matter, you know, what side of the, you know, the divide you're coming from.
And I think it's important that we shake loose this idea in children's books, in particular, picture books, that the only story or the most important story to tell about Black people is, stories about the civil rights movement or slavery or just Black suffering, because then you paint us into this box that makes it so that that's all you see when you see us. I have a book called Early Sunday Morning that I wrote for the imprint, and it's about a little girl having her first church solo, and it is literally about the community coming together to convince this little girl that she does have what it takes to stand up in front of everybody and overcome her jitters and sing. That's it. And a white mom DM'd me on Instagram and she said, I have to tell you, I so appreciate your mission, because here's what happened. I went to read Early Sunday Morning to my son. And as soon as he saw that it takes place, it opens up to a family standing in front of a church. And he automatically thought that something bad was going to happen, that somebody was going to bring some dogs out, or the church was going to get bombed, or that something, people are going to have to march, or the children are going to have to, endure some kind of pain. And she had to explain to him, no, it's just a book about a little girl who's going to sing a song and she's nervous. And so that tells me everything that I need to know about the importance of what Cozbi is doing, of what Charly's doing, of what Denene Millner Books is doing. Is we're trying very hard to change this narrative, or not change it, but add to the narrative, right? That, our history absolutely is important. If you don't know where you've come from, there's no way that you'll figure out where to go, right? We get that. But I'm a firm believer that we also need to let our children just live, let them live. Let's see their humanity. Let's celebrate the child who is overcoming the jitters. Let's celebrate the little girl who's having an ordinary day with her mom, but goes to sleep thinking it was the most extraordinary day ever. Let's celebrate little Black boys who have bad days and are surrounded by people who love them and tell them tomorrow's another day, keep your head up, you can try again. Those stories are important. And it's important that we open the door and we let as many storytellers come in to tell those stories, because all children, Black children, all children deserve those stories.
Mhm.
So I think, oh, it's 8 o'clock. Time
Wow.
just flew. It flew.
Wow.
Um, David, it's maybe we can take one more question.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can't believe it's already 8 o'clock. I think that what you just said, Denene, really answered a lot of what was on people's minds in the question too, in terms of the mission of Denene Millner Books and the kinds of stories that you're most interested in sharing. I guess it speaks to the power of the medium as well. So there are also people wondering, why the picture book, especially from artists like you, Charly, and Cozbi, who obviously work in so many different genres and so many different forms. What is it that attracts you to the form of the picture book? And there are even questions of, have you illustrated for older audiences? But I guess really what is unique, or what draws you to the form of the picture book?
Should I go first? Okay. I think that when I'm gone off this earth, I would rather be known for creating at least one children's book that has inspired and has moved and has lifted children than anything that's had to do with my fine art. My fine art is extremely personal, but these children books are even more personal to me. I want them to know how unique and special they are. I want them to be inspired. I want them to feel love. And so I think that in the end, I want, and I have to again acknowledge that A Snowy Day and so many ways created who I am today. It inspired me and it made me feel good because I saw myself and I saw my mother. And I want children to see themselves and see their family and make a connection, emotional connection to that. And so that's more important to me than, I absolutely enjoy doing what I do with my fine art, but that children books are extremely personal and close to my heart.
And I'm definitely with Charly. And the reality of it is that children really are magical. They come into this world so on fire, so completely lit up. It's like when you hear them observing things and connecting their dots, it's just like fireworks of little bits of brilliance, and then something happens. Something happens oftentimes in the hands of adults that can't even see them as like who they are. And so that's why for me, children's books allows sort of that early exposure so that the child can either see him or herself or someone that he or she might be interested in knowing even, and sort of like connecting, allowing their dots to remain connected because they come into the world that way, and so for me, that's what children's books do. And oftentimes it's sort of the industry wants to push things a particular way, because we have something about what early childhood education should look like. And that's why, these like things like the Reggio Emilia that shows up where it's like, wait, you could do a study on blue and introduce children to indigo so that they're painting with indigo and they're listening to Miles Davis kind of blue. And it's like, there's so many ways and so many languages that you can expose a child to. It's like, we only are now coming to that understanding. But, we should really sort of examine what children bring and keep our eyes open because they are full of magic.
Can we put a pin in that study of blue? What you just said is just like, that's a book. Just saying. That is gorgeous. Just the creativity on this right here, right in this space is just beyond. I am so grateful to you, Charly. I am so grateful to you, Cozbi, for the work that you've done with me, for the work that you've done for children, for the work that you've done for our bookshelves and for history, for legacy. And I thank you for this evening, for taking this time with us to talk about these beautiful books and your work and your art and your inspiration. I am deeply grateful.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thanks for having us, Denene.
Yes, thank you all on behalf of everyone at the Carle and all of our attendees just in the chat room. I'm going to save this just so I can send it to you. Just so many wonderful comments in the chat, just thanking you for all that you've done, that you said, and just the really empowering, inspiring work that you're all doing. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think we might have gotten a sneak peek at maybe 2 or 3 or 4 other books that haven't been made yet.
Right. Oh, I'm writing down the blue one. That's
right.
Getting ready to be a thing.
So we have to say goodbye tonight, but the amazing thing is we get to, we look forward to the next project and to connecting with you, Denene and Cozbi and Charly. If and when you can make it to the actual museum, we would love, love, love to welcome you in through the doors. And that goes for all of our people joining and participating from home too. We miss you, and we really can't wait to see you live and in person. But thank you all again for joining us this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.